and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And we have a great show for you this evening. We have Sam Maranto, and he's going to be talking about, I don't know if you've seen in the news, but there's been Mothman sightings in Chicago, and a lot going on there. It started about 6 years ago, and then really coming on pretty hard starting last April. So he'll be on. And before that, we have Alejandro Rojas. He's in a special place right now, and we're going to be talking to him. So he'll be coming up in just a minute. Now, I have an announcement that's going to make the people on YouTube really happy, I think. But it's just that I decided that I'm going to keep streaming on YouTube instead of going over to KGRA Radio, basically because I'd be cutting down the show too much for subscribers. In other words, the 2-hour show after commercials edited out would only be basically an hour and 40 minutes, and I can't do that to all my subscribers. So I'd rather just leave it at the 2-hour show and keep going on YouTube. I had been a little disappointed by the live audience volume, the number of people, but hopefully that will build up over time. And I do like doing the live YouTube. So that's that. And I'm going to bring in Alejandro Rojas. How are you? Welcome to the show, Alejandro.
Hola.
And aloha.
Chaka.
Aloha was last week. You were in Hawaii and forgot to tell me you were in Hawaii.
I swear I told you, and the listeners can tell us whether or not I had told you. But my listeners knew. I think.
Oh, really? Okay.
So,
all right, listeners. So I will give $50 to the listener that can contact me and prove that you said it on my show. I'm just teasing you.
Nice.
Just teasing you.
So yeah, I know. I felt so bad when you're like, it's time for the show, and I'm like, well, I'm in Hawaii. So last week I was in Hawaii. It was a lot of fun. Nothing at all to do with UFOs. Only fun, and because for people like us who've been doing it for so long, it's not necessarily fun anymore. And I know your guest Sam, he's been doing this for decades and worked so hard at it. So it's a lot of hard work when you're doing some real stuff. But yeah, so that was a lot of fun. I super apologize, and I almost missed today's show too because I am at space camp.
Yeah.
Look, I literally just got back. So this was the cool shirt that I took with my NASA Star Trek shirt. But, of course, this cool jumpsuit is something that they gave us. So this is for, once again, the show Mars with National Geographic. But it's also, my buddies at National Geographic, for another show that they've got coming out called One Strange Rock. Here we go. Okay. And there'll be more coming out about that soon. I'm not even sure how much I can talk about this. But this is a really cool space show. Essentially, it's a documentary, but it's from the perspective of the astronauts. And they have some really incredible insight. We got to actually talk with one of the guys today. And I've interviewed a couple of the other guys that have been in the show. And it's kind of along the same lines. So if you're interested in what I'm talking about, my interview with Mike Massimo, the astronaut, he talked a lot about, and I wrote something on the Huffington Post about his personal experience, kind of the emotional experience they have when they're in space. And that's what's really cool to hear from them, because they're usually focused on their tasks. Surprisingly, they'll tell you that. I didn't even notice much at first. We've got a job to do, and we do our job. They're very dedicated to their job. And like lots of civil servants, they they are cognizant of that this is taxpayer money and they've got a job to do. But there are times when they're done screwing that bolt in or something, and then they look at the planet or they realize, holy crap, I am just floating here above the planet. And they have these extraordinary moments of, you know, what it's like to be there and experience that. And that's what they're trying to kind of get across in this 10-part series that'll be showing up sometime, I think, this summer or this coming fall, springtime, something like that. Well, yeah. That's a big gap. But yeah, I'll be writing about it more and adding more. And then Mars, of course, I've talked about before. That's this really cool TV show where it's half documentary, half drama. That's why I was in Hungary on the set for second season of that show. And this is with them, so with National Geographic. So they're doing some really cool stuff. And they brought us to space camp, and it's been a lot of fun. So today, I sent you a video and some pictures, but I did the...
And I just ran that slideshow.
Oh, okay. I did the multi-axis trainer, which is a thing you get on, and it rotates, and it looks like the thing in Contact. And I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm past my roller coaster days and everything. And, you know, sometimes my stomach can't handle all of those things. But surprisingly, they said no. And actually, because your stomach is the center of gravity, it doesn't mess with your stomach. And as long as you don't close your eyes and then reopen them, your brain, because you're spinning, I guess, the balance in your brain, which causes motion sickness and stuff like that, doesn't really have time to disorient the way it does in a boat or something like that because it's not repetitive. And so they said you won't get dizzy. And for the most part, they were right. It wasn't that it was strange and there were some G-forces on your head, but it wasn't as bad as it looks. And I probably shouldn't tell people that. I should tell them, it was so crazy and hard, because then it sounds more like I was a tough guy or something. But it isn't as bad as you think. And I was really kind of just a total wuss. And are you sure this isn't going to be bad? I'm not going to get sick. But it was a lot of fun. Yep. And let's see, what else did we do? We did other training things astronauts do. We did a simulated mission. And I got to be Capcom, which is fun. The guy who communicates with the capsule. So I got to use my Capcom voice, with, Discovery, this is Capcom. Could you turn on your left thruster? And, the kind of cadence that they do when you see it on the TV or something like that. So that was a lot of fun. I think that had to do with
bad audio, though, too, part of it. From back in the 70s, the audio wasn't so good. When they sounded like the telephone voice almost.
But it was fun.
Hey,
that added to the charm.
Yeah, I bet you were great at it. Hey, I've heard something. They're doing some studies on the human brain in space. Have you heard anything about that?
I have actually heard nothing about that.
Yeah, because it changes.
Interesting.
It changes without gravity. So.
Well, with this Mars show, there's been a lot. I wrote a story not too long ago about radiation. Shielding. Right. And that was something Steve Patronek, who wrote a book that inspired the Mars program. His room is literally across the hallway from me. And I wrote a lot about some of the work he did. And he's the one who tipped me off on they'll probably use water. And so I wrote an article about this, like wastewater and recycle water. It's really interesting. And this is a story I've been following for years since I got to go to Johnson and talk with the Orion guys about it. But so I've got an article on that. I think that's interesting. And there's a lot of other things that are really interesting. For instance, these Elon, as soon as just a couple weeks ago, Elon Musk of SpaceX said they're going to get people up there within the next couple of years. But there are some major issues that still have to be worked out. The effect of on the body of long-term being in space is still not something that is completely figured out. I mean, we had a guy, an astronaut, just recently spend a year up there. But the problem is you lose muscle mass, but you also lose bone mass because you don't have to have that. The bones don't have to work as hard. And that is not something that can come back. You can, work out and get the muscle mass back, but the bone structure will never be the same. And so that's one of the issues that we really don't have figured out. So even though technically we may be ready to do that very soon. And some will argue that technically, if we had the political and motivation, that we could have done it years ago. But that it's more complicated than that. That it might not be something where we're going to have people on Mars within the next few years, like Elon talks about. But there is a big race. And we will definitely, most likely, have at least people orbiting Mars or being able to go and come back within the next few years. So it's a lot closer than people think. There's many more issues than people realize. That's what this show, Mars, is highlighting. And then there's the other thing, which is China and Russia are saying, we're going to go to the moon in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And this is kind of exciting because this has to do with Robert Bigelow, who, of course, is a big UFO buff. And he is actually lobbying to have his program, the Beam program, his inflatable device, to be a moon base. And what's exciting about that is that the closer the Chinese and the Russians get, the more likely it is then we'll be in another space race. Where, I mean, can you imagine the Russians and the Chinese having a base on the moon and the U.S. being cool with that?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think that there'll be a lot of inspiration then to have our own base there. And the person who's closest, at least as far as we know publicly, is Bigelow. He's the one. This is exactly what he's working with NASA on. So if the political climate changes, he could be tasked with, okay, Bigelow, let's do this. And in fact, in this space center, I know I've shown pictures because we've seen big pictures with Bigelow with us before. But in this space center, I was just out and I got some pictures of it. I'll post on Facebook soon. But you've seen it before. But it's Bigelow's mock-up of his base, his moon base that he is working on and that he's working with NASA on. So it's very possible that one of our UFO buff buddies is going to be the first guy to have a base on a planet other than Earth. So that's
Wow.
pretty exciting.
That is, yeah, that is. I remember I talked to Alan Bean. He was the fourth man on the moon several years ago. And I said, I couldn't imagine being, standing on the moon and looking up at Earth and like just panicking, like, how am I going to get back? And he said, nope, you just take the task that's in front of you. And he said, you have to do it like that. He said, I had to break it up. So, okay, next I'm doing this or next I'm doing that. But he didn't want to look at it like he had to get back. He didn't want to think about it.
You know what? And going through that thing that we did, the simulation of a mission, it makes a lot of sense because they are busy. I mean, they've got to hit this button, hit that button. They've got to roll this procedure, and it's this back and forth, which is great because it doesn't take them long to get up into space. Yet then once they're there, the dangerous part is when you're coming back into orbit or when you're going out. And that part goes so quickly and you're so busy doing different things that it's not that aspect. Your mind is busy, so you're not thinking of that part. The aspect where I would have problems with, which I don't think I can do anymore, which is kind of a sad revelation for me. And this happened at Epcot Center, where they have this simulator, where they simulate the G-forces. And it was like, oh my gosh, it was like 30 seconds. And after 5 seconds, I was like, I want off of this damn thing. And after I got off of that, I was like, I can't be an astronaut. I can't do this. So that physical part of it is really still difficult. So just imagine going through those G-forces and then having to accomplish these extremely important tasks, pushing these buttons and doing everything at the right sequence and timing. So
yeah,
they're just, I personally have a huge respect for NASA and for astronauts, and I think they're incredible people and what they do is great. So yeah, this is all really exciting.
Now they're going to have to figure out some type of like centrifuge or something to simulate gravity if we are going to spend a lot of time in space. Or you're right, people are going to have bone loss. They'll never be able to come back to the planet again. If someone's on Mars and they lose their bone loss, and muscle, like you said, can be rebuilt, but they're going to have to stay put on Mars and look like aliens eventually.
Well, that's the other thing, and that's what. There's a really interesting show on Sci-Fi right now, and I can't remember what it's called right now, but essentially, it's the future where there's a colony on Mars, there's Earth, and then there's miners that mine asteroids, which is a very plausible future for us, but that these different groups of people have formed their own governments and the challenges that creates, which is a very real issue. One of the issues they're tackling on Mars is the political climate. And the way it is right now is, of course, the struggle is between spending resources on space and then helping private space do what they want to do out there. But what is going to become a bigger issue, which I think people haven't, especially politicians, have not really dealt with or thought of, which you're going to have to, is once we have a group of people on Mars, what is their government? Who governs them? Because technically they're sovereign. And if it's SpaceX, for example, that gets them out there, SpaceX can do whatever the heck they want out there when it comes to governance. Wow. And we really don't have any. How would we, administer, or how would we enforce any laws out there? So that's going to be a big deal. And if they decide to self-govern, they'll be able to do that. And then that creates, of course, political issues between, us and them and people, depending on what they choose to do out there. So, or if we have a problem with any of the laws that they institute or the ways that they enforce their laws, if they decide to space people, which in sci-fi movies is where, if your bad corporal punishment is shooting you out into space, you get spaced. Yeah. So who knows what'll happen. So I think, there's just a lot of really, really interesting issues. But the issues, that's what this television show on Sci-Fi goes over, which is really interesting, an aspect in the future where all these different governing bodies are kind of arguing and fighting with each other. Well, which makes sense because every governing body argues and fights with each other. Yeah,
I would say that if someone's young and thinking about going to law school, they should maybe consider space law.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's called, but
it exists. It's real. In fact, Bigelow has made some major inroads in that area because one of his things early on, just a few years ago, he made a lot of news, and it was a big deal because he was saying, look, if I'm going to build, let's say, a hotel on the moon, where can I put it? You guys haven't figured out the laws around who owns what on the moon. And if I plant my hotel somewhere and then all of a sudden the land is given away or the land doesn't technically belong to me somehow, then I can't move it. So we have to figure this out before, those of us private companies establish these different bases. And so it was the first time where law had to seriously tackle kind of this issue. And it's something that they've got to work on. But it seems like really it's going to kind of be like a back in the cowboy days. It's going to be like if you're Wild there West. First. Yep. Yeah, the Wild West. If you're there first, who's going to kick you out? There's nobody to kick you out. And that's what the problem is if China and Russia get there, I mean, they could claim the moon. They could claim the moon amongst each other. And certainly the United States isn't going to like that. So there's exciting things going on when it comes to space.
I think we should just put up a few individuals from North Korea and just say, okay, this is all yours. You take it from here.
Give North Korea the moon?
Yeah, why not? The moon or Mars, and just say, okay, you deal with it.
Kind of like the old honeymooners. I'll send you to the moon type of thing.
Alice.
Maybe. There's that's thinking out of the box.
I guess so. Hey, Alejandro. Well, enjoy the rest of the. How long are you there for?
I am here until Friday.
Friday. Well, have a great time, huh?
Thank you very much. I'm glad I was able to be on the show. Wonderful to see Sam's face on the video here. It's always good to see Sam. So you have a great show.
All right. Okay. Hey, thanks a lot.
See you guys.
All right. Bye now. Sam, I'm sorry. It just took me a minute to get you up here on screen. We have our guest tonight, and it's Sam Maranto. He actually helped out with the show way back. It's always fun having him on. And Sam, I hope you remember to unmute your mic, and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me back on. It has been a while, and I haven't talked to you, haven't seen you. My gosh, it's been ages.
Yeah, well, we had a lot of fun out.
Oh, my gosh.
We had a lot of fun.
Did we not? It was great.
Yeah, out in Arizona a few years ago. Yeah, it was a blast. So I was really, I had been getting a lot of email about the Mothman sightings. MUFON got involved as far as it being reported. And then I found out you were doing the research on it, which I think is pretty exciting. Now, I'd mentioned on this road, this is on the show, once a month or so, I'm going to do a show that's off the topic of UFOs, and that is the show tonight. Because I could no longer do the Monday night show, by the way, if you are listening and you missed the last few shows, the Monday night is just too much for me. So anyway, welcome to the show. And before we get going here, can you, for the person that's hearing you for the first time, a little quick nutshell background, if you would?
Well, I've been doing research and UFO research for, 30 years. 20 years close, I would say, with MUFON, but I was doing research beforehand. I'm a consultant for Hollywood. Any sort of interested parties looking to do some programs, give me a call if you're interested. And the other thing is I've done very interesting cases. I was lucky enough to work with the O'Hare case back in 2006. And that was a landmark case as far as aviation. We had so many witnesses. The other one that really hasn't received that much publicity, but hopefully at some point it will, is the Tinley Park case, which was a mass sighting. I've worked on a few other cases that were very good too. The Rockford mass sighting case is one that's probably little heard of at all. And then I've worked on a few other interesting cases, Fredericks, Wisconsin case, long ongoing third CE3 type encounters, and unusual phenomena. An unusual phenomena is how I really got into this. Parapsychology, paranormal, preternatural, whatever you want to call this crazy stuff, and even cryptids. I have an interest in all this, but I haven't really gotten into working with the cryptid aspect of all this strangeness until recently.
Yeah. And so were you actually contacted? Now, wait a minute. Let's talk a little bit about Chicago first, because there is a little bit of confusion, but wasn't there a sighting first in 2011?
Yes, 2011 is really what I call the impetus, and that's where it all began. That's where it has its root, as far as having some sort of where people really jumped on board that there must be something there. And the first item that showed up, in fact, Lon Strickler has Monsters, Phantoms and Monsters. It's a site, and he's been very good at posting the raw data up there. And same thing with Manuel Navarrete, and he has a site called UFO Clearinghouse, and I put up the raw data too. MUFON receives the data, puts some stuff up, and back in 2011 we had this photo come in, and this photo, by the way, was not of something the individual seen. What had happened, he was going down 63rd, and I think you know the area possibly, 63rd and Pulaski in Chicago on the south side, and there's this large Native American Indian statue up there. Yeah. And it isn't some sort of tribute to anything. It was a tobacco shop years ago. In fact, I knew guys in the neighborhood, they used to shoot arrows in the back of the darn thing. They have too many beers and they got crazy. But this thing was up there, and it has its left thumb is positioned in such a way, and this whole scenario is so apropos because it has to do with perspective and the right place and seeing the wrong thing. So imagine a thumb position in the midriff, and it's at the right angle. It could appear as something other than a thumb. And this is what the gentleman recalled seeing, and he wanted to take a picture of it. He gets out of his car, he takes a picture of it, and here he gets home, and lo and behold, what's in this picture? Something truly unusual. Well, he submitted it as being a UFO, and he sent it to MUFON. So I have the raw data, the metadata, and I've done the enhancements. But initially, right off the bat, I thought, it's just some sort of bat or something, maybe even a butterfly. I didn't think it was anything unusual. but all of a sudden it took on its own life as being some sort of cryptid, incarnate in this photo. And as you may recall, there were 2 other sightings soon thereafter. They made that report October the 13th, and I believe it was on that same day UFO Clearinghouse received a report from 2 girls who had seen these eyeballs in the window of their dorm room or apartment, and gotten all shook up about it. So that came in and reinforced this photo. But I think I sent you some information on the photo, didn't I?
Yeah. And I'm going to put that photo up on YouTube so the person can just hang in there, and that'll come right up. But let's talk about how the sightings began all the way back in of people basically saying the same thing that they were seeing in Point Pleasant.
Yes, what happens is, we had the 50th anniversary going on. So, of course, there's tons of information all over the internet. The massive party they had down at this big festival, 50th anniversary. So it's in the mindset of so many people automatically. To reinforce that even more so, there was a new documentary out by Small Town Monsters, and they started a Kickstarter. I think it was back in January, and it filled up very well. They had enough money to go about doing their documentary, and they did it. It was released, I believe, in June, and done very well. All in time for this big ceremony, the 50th anniversary. But it also, I think, with all this news and it being so prominent on the internet, and this is the problem today, what we're seeing is very unusual activity of people being, it's either some type of trolling exercise that we're getting so many reports, because as you will soon discover, and you may have been reading these reports, there's many of them, they're just being submitted fictitious. It's hard to tell when you have something genuine or just a creative narrative. Mm-hmm. And this, I think, may be our first scenario of what may, in the end, turn out to be a cyber flap. Now, if there's anything else genuine in there, this is thrown us off, seeing so much craziness that, if there is something genuine, it's just making it that much harder for us researchers to find something genuine. And that's what we really want to get anyways.
Some of the reports, were saying how this thing just seemed to leap up without even flapping its wings.
Yes.
Yeah, that is, and that's also what they said in Virginia.
Yes, I mean the correlations are there, but you also have your narrative laid out. You have your script in place. When you already have your script in place, all you do is read it and reincorporate it. In fact, what happens in these reports, when you read the reports, they're hitting all those little buttons, each and every one of them, and they're placing them at the right point to hit you emotionally with those little nuances that hit it. Bam, bam. Yes, it leaped in the air. It did this. It had the red eyes. But the problem is, in the reports that we received, our very first report in 2017, is the Pilsner district, Pilsen district, and here these guys are out at this huge. This is a very big international vegetable market, and it's a big location. Security guards. It's a very beautiful location. It's not some sleazy joint. And here they're seeing this 6 foot tall plus thing up there that looks like a massive owl, and they're out there and they're throwing rocks at it, and it scares them. It takes off. But here, the funny thing is, it was raining out. You don't have that in the report. Oh. The other thing is, another gentleman went there to investigate it, and he says when he talked to the security guard, he had no idea what he's even talking about. There were people out there at the same time. He got there at 2 o'clock in the morning when this event supposedly took place, and they says, we don't know what you're talking about. Nobody heard about this. Again, another person Ellison Jorlin went out there and actually she went to each and every one of these locations, as in the footsteps of the witnesses. And so you could see the area. It just seemed extremely odd that nobody else knew what was going on. And that was the first one. Now, the second one was at Humboldt Park. Oh, by the way, that was the 16th. They have it wrong on the internet. It's the 16th, which was Easter Sunday at 2 o'clock in the morning. 10 o'clock that night, gentleman's outside with his kids, some friends of his. If you read the report, you can see it sounds very disingenuous, but they're saying that they see this large owl, a lechuza, okay, which could be a witch type thing, an old woman, and it turns into an owl. And again, this thing shoots up in the air. And then the third one we get, which comes in, I think, on the 20th or 24th, and that was supposedly taking place on the 15th. There's a woman who's on a boat off Montrose Harbor. She's out there with her husband, mind you. And the strange thing about it is they're out there, and it's the 15th of April. The water temperature is 44 degrees, though it was warm that day. And this is what it says. We're out there on a boat 2 miles out at 10 o'clock at night. There were 3 to 5s plus 7-foot waves. We had a small craft warning. 34 mile-an-hour gale winds going on and off. They said they see these large bat-type things flying around the boat. Well, I know you've done enough boating. When you're on a boat at night, you're out there partying supposedly, and you have this rough water. You're going to have your cabin lights on. How good is your vision going to be beyond looking into the dark? It's going to be very difficult. Now, if by chance you have a bunch of opportunistic seagulls out there, which could go out 2 miles, they look big, and they could scare the heck out of you.
Especially
because
with the shadowing, if there's shadowing
yes,
too.
The shadow looks bigger.
Yeah.
And that would scare you. Then she states, assuming it's a she, that they were able to see the reflection of the moonlight in the eyes of the birds, or the bats, these massive bats, which were bigger than her husband, because obviously he was in the sky, so they got a cross comparison, 6 foot something. This is what gets me. The moon wasn't up till an hour and 43 minutes after that time.
Sam.
Looking to these reports, they get that way.
So, Sam, are you, we had a little Skype issue just a second ago. Are you basically getting at that you think this is all a hoax? Is this what's...
Not all.
Okay.
No.
So let's talk about the ones that aren't right now, the ones that seem more credible.
The one one individual that I spoke to, and I didn't speak to too many people. Other investigators apparently did or claimed they did, as many as 20. I spoke to one individual who came forward and actually went on the radio. He was sitting at that time. He's a truck driver, and he was picking up an order to move from a location, and it was on near Cicero and 290. And he's backing up. He's sitting there, and he sees what appears to be an object that was black, and it was like an elongated football with. He only seen one wing. He was being very honest. He didn't see the other wing, and assumed there was another one, and that had a reversed scalloped edge. And as he sees it moving along, and it's moving, by the way, into the wind, so it's not servant to the wind. And it's going up into the clouds. So this thing's moving along, or else it's tethered to something. He can't see it. And this thing's moving along, and it's going up. Well, it startled him so bad, he called up his wife, his brother, and he was really shooken up by it. And he says it did remind him of the photograph back in 2011. And you couldn't believe how many people revert back to that photograph in 2011. Again. because, it was on the internet. They said it was the swing thing, and they revert to it. So, of course, this is in the mindset of so many people. And this is what he's seen. He says it looked like the Batmobile, very much like that item, that picture from 63rd and Pulaski.
Right. And I just pulled that up again. So what are the skeptics saying about that particular image? Do they think it looks like one of those flight suits, or are they saying things like that, or are they saying it could be a kite, or what do you hear?
Well, I'm neither a skeptic. I'm an investigative researcher, so I don't really give a hoot what it is. I just want to know what it is. Uh-huh. And in evaluating that image, and I don't think anybody's even come close to the amount of time that I've spent on it, analyzing it, right off the bat, I thought it was either a bat, which it's not, or some sort of insect, which it's not. And a few people, right off the get-go, said, it looks like one of those bat kites. And sure enough, that is what it is. It is a bat kite known as the fox bat. And it's about 48 inches long, or wide, excuse me. And the manufacturer is Gala. And they put them out back, I think they stopped making them late 80s, maybe 86, 87. And they're collectible. They're made out of plastic, not like paper when we were kids. These are plastic. And they're pretty durable. And in fact, I found a video this year of somebody flying two different types of these old Gala kites. And they're out there. They use them. They fly them. So that's what it is. It is a Gala kite. And it's pretty cool.
I'm just laughing because so many people were, posting this. And I also put it up on the YouTube, like Mothman with the question mark. So I'm glad I put the question mark there. And so there are no real pictures, though. Nobody. I listened to an interview of someone, not an interview, but a transcript of an interview, I guess it was, and she said that taking a picture never even crossed her mind when she had an encounter. This was not in Chicago. This was one of the ones that were in, West Virginia.
Oh yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm guilty too. I've had UFO sightings, and I had the opportunity to take a photo, but you're staring, and you don't even want to blink.
Right.
But that does happen. In this instance, we do have another photograph that is claimed to be one of these Mothman photos, and it was from Melrose Park, and that was August the 4th. And the funny thing is, I told Julie, we are now going to be getting another photo, and she goes, "Why is that?" Because there was talk on the on social media that what's going to happen when a photo shows up and some unscrupulous researcher or group gets their hand on it. Are they going to try to make money off of it, or what are they going to do? And I go, it's going to happen. We're going to get it. Sure enough, August the 4th, there's a photograph that comes in with a narrative and a report to MUFON. But this time, it didn't just come into MUFON. It went to two different groups. It went to UFO Clearinghouse, and it went to MUFON. Now, right after that was, I believe, the very next day, another report comes in stating that an individual only about a mile or so away from where this sighting and photograph took place, a soccer mom and her three daughters seen this massive bat-like creature, this human-type creature flying over their heads and startled them. And the funny thing is, both those reports, and mind you, of all the reports that were received, none of them had contact information except for one. Everything was fictitious contact information. Oh. We have never, ever had a series of anything that could be resembling a flap or any sort of continuity as far as whatever, a subject matter. Never, ever have we had something like that. Now, of course, they requested to remain anonymous, and anonymity could only be given to a real honest-to-goodness witness after you what? Know that they are a witness, and they are who they are. You can't give it to a word. We have a bunch of names there. They don't match up to anything, by the way. So here we have fictitious data. We have no contact information, and we have a suspect narrative. I had asked right away on the first three that we look at the IP addresses to see where they're coming in. And on the first three, two of them came from the same source. The very first one at the Pilsen district, and then the lady on the boat came from the same IP address. On the last four, it just so happened three of them came from the same IP address. So we have suspect five of them, one being disingenuous. The other one was a guy that seen a flash of light, a large, heard an explosion outside, and therefore it had to be Mothman. He was just being facetious. And so that wasn't even put into the equation. They pulled that out of the, there's actually a map that Lon Strickler had put up on Google of, I think it's now 55. He pulled some of them out. So here we are. We have these things, these reports coming in, these interesting narratives, and they are some, it's like some creative writing class. And then they're coming from the same, same IP addresses, and that isn't suspect? Come on, right?
Now, also, these are, I know there was some speculation out there that this is right, or has been happening right near Second City. And there's some speculation that it's someone either involved in that's trying to, do something really creative. Have you heard anything like that?
I don't know the folks at Second City. I know some of the other people at different locations, as you know. But I haven't heard anything.
Yeah.
I have a feeling it's actually a couple different things going on. Some impish antics, maybe by some adolescents. Some so-called skeptic groups that want to do some creative writing. And it may be a trolling. It may be a trolling enterprise by some agency to get their green, their new people, green as they be, out there to get used to doing propaganda on the internet. It's very effective. It's extremely effective. People just want to accept everything as factual without even looking at the bare bone event. How can we tell? How can we tell today? If you can't contact them, you can't go out there eye to eye, you can't investigate or ask questions, and we're supposed to accept it?
Yeah. So it sounds to me that so all this publicity has been just publicity for nothing. Because I've heard about the Chicago Mothman now for, it seems like all the way back since April.
Since April, it's been very big. Well, I think if there was anything that did happen, I have no idea as far as which ones were more so genuine than others, of something unusual being seen. There's been a lot of sightings around the first sighting in 2017 took place at Oz Park, and you may have read that report too. I hope you did. I don't know if you did, and it was at Oz Park, where supposedly, because I didn't interview the witness, and that's the other problem too. None of these witnesses, except for one, has been able to come forward and to be cross-examined by other people than one or two people. We don't usually have that happen. In the original Mothman case, multiple researchers were out there, investigators, even law enforcement, and they were talking to people. People talked. They had multiple people talking to them, not just a individual that basically had their story and that was it. Over here, that isn't the case at all. There's only one individual that's actually come forward and spoke to multiple investigators and researchers. So that's kind of strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, anyways, back to Oz Park. Are you looking at it by any chance, the Oz Park report?
I have it in front of me, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this individual at around 7:30 at night goes walking to Oz Park. And L. Frank Baum, wrote the Wizard of Oz, wrote that right in that area on what street? Humboldt Street. Humboldt Street is where he lived at. Okay, and Oz. And if you looked at 2011, the very last case took place at Washington Park by a gentleman from Tasmania who's seeing this large sugar glider type thing flying overhead. And he was from Tasmania, which is, of course, Australia, which is also known as Oz. Oz is also known for fantasy and illusion. It's also a code name or whatever. But anyways, this woman and her dog, which is a Jack Russell Terrier, not a, what was it, a Karen Terrier, I believe is what Toto was. And she's walking along the Yellow Brick Road, and she's walking along, and she's going to this one field there, I believe it was near the baseball area, or baseball diamonds, and sees this large, very large, winged thing sitting there, standing there with these red eyes. And it turns, at first doesn't see her, and then it sees her. The dog was very afraid. And as you know, apparently these Jack Russell Terriers are pretty bold and brazen dogs, small. I think they're being enlisted for special ops these days. And they're very intelligent, And this dog was afraid that day, very afraid. And so she gets out there, and this thing turns around, looks at her, and it was as if it was able to see right through to her soul, is what it states. So it really startled the heck out of her. And this thing shot straight up in the air. So I don't know. The Yellow Brick Road may have got a little more yellow at that point on the way back home. I don't know. But this is what it sounds like. And this is the scenario. And I see a lot of overtones of unusual things that are like Masonic or mystical thrown in here. You're back at Oz Park, and then we had a sighting at the Owl Lounge, and the Owl Lounge is the symbol is a pyramid with the all-seeing eye, and that guy seemed to be pretty straightforward. A friend of mine interviewed him, and he said he seen something that looked like a pterodactyl flying. Well, I think a lot of these were genuine reports of misidentifications. People were not lying. They were interpreting what they saw. Now, was there something truly unusual being seen? With the volume of guff that's out there, it makes it difficult. I would like to think there is. I mean, we know weird exists. One of my first books I ever read was, of course, the search for a living fossil. So cryptids do take place. But it doesn't mean you're going to find one in your grandmother's coal bin. So, we have to be logical. This is a very big city with a lot of witnesses, a lot of cameras, and none of this has come forward. Where's the rest of the evidence? And there were sightings right on Lakeshore Drive, supposedly, at 10 o'clock at night. Where is the video?
Yeah. Sam, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we're having a little Skype issue every now and then. Your screen freezes up. So, this is interesting. Is that when the couple was walking home like at 10 o'clock at night, that one in particular?
Very interesting, but startling. And apparently only the woman came forward. That was something I did not receive. That went to Phantoms and Monsters. Lon received the call, apparently talked to the woman, but I think the husband didn't talk. It was just the wife. Another call that he did receive, one of these unusual ones, was in Bolingbrook. Now, I've investigated that location. It's a park, Indian Boundary Park, and it's adjacent to a very long stretch of open area along the DuPage River. And this park, supposedly this individual at late at night, 10 o'clock or so, starts walking through the park. And it's closed, by the way. The park is closed at dusk. And they give tickets, and they're very serious about that. Though I guess some people wander out there. And I find it unusual because the mosquitoes, and we have West Nile out here, as you know, we have issues with that. She's out there and wandering around in the dark. and sees this figure that she thinks is a couple kissing. And then she takes out her camera and she was going to take a picture of them. Now, first of all, I have two problems with the judgment of this person. Taking a picture of some strangers who are maybe having some interlude that you may not want to interrupt because you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
You may get your head bashed in. So, and then the other thing is you're being eaten alive by mosquitoes, and you're gonna, in either way, if a police officer comes by, you're gonna get a ticket. I'm questioning the sanity about this whole story. And I guess she feels that it wasn't a couple, but some unusual creature making a bunch of gurgling noises, and very tall creature with gurgling noises, and it had something wrapped around it. Well, gurgling noises, it's right next to the sanitary refinement, which is literally feet away. And, you know, a lot of gurgling noises you get when you're transferring fluids from tank to tank in the middle of the night. I spoke to a number of the employees there, and they said, we know nothing about this. It's a small community. In fact, that's what each person said. This is a small community here. If anything was going on, we would have heard about it. I also spoke to the gentleman who lived right at the corner house, and he says, I was up that night. I heard nothing, didn't see anybody out there, and I'm sure people do go back there, but I didn't hear anything about this. But that's where that one stands. So I question the sanity of the person out there, but I shouldn't say sanity, but the judgment of the person.
Yeah. Sam, how much time would you say that you have involved in researching just this, the Mothman? I mean, I know you're a real dedicated researcher.
Volumes. I wouldn't. And I've spent the time on the cases that I can actually do something about, or do a cross comparison. We've seen there's a lot of commonality in the narratives. We've seen that there are some unusual aspects that you don't see in a regular report. And that's why we call a lot of this into question. Not everything. We know that people have seen things, and they were honest to call in and said what they've seen. For instance, there was a sighting down in Kell City. A person in the afternoon, I think it was around 7:30. I think it was May 27th. She's seen something. At first, she thought it was a helicopter. She's looking out to the west, so she's seeing a silhouette. And the other thing is, at that time of the day, the sun was just about ready to set. There was very little sunlight. And she said that they'd seen it. They didn't know what it was until it went in front of the moon. Well, the moon was only 1/6 of its illumination. 1/6. Now, the arm, and you take your arm and your thumb and index finger and you put it out, it's the size of an aspirin. Now you take that down to 1/6. That's pretty small. And in the blink of an eye, you're going to assess something that you just thought was a helicopter minutes before. I have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with the person. I just think the environment isn't good to make a judgment call on something like that. And a lot of reports come in like that. The other thing is, a lot of them sound like possibly a misidentification of great blue herons, and of course the sandhill cranes. Sandhill cranes in flight look like pterodactyls. I've seen them. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the things that it definitely does look like. So I don't think it's people are pranking everything. And I would love to think there's some cryptid out there that I could possibly get a matching wardrobe with and take it out in the town. But I don't know. Not as of yet. And I'll have to make sure you get a matching wardrobe too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I am opening up. I think in the second hour we can talk about other things. I thought there was a lot more to this than there actually is. And it's still very interesting how this is going on. But I would like to know if anyone is listening live now, if they'd like to call in and ask our guest a question. The number is 603-967-4030. Or you can Skype in, and that's Marty Willis, MartyWillis. So, as far as the original Mothman sightings, people have talked about a similar type of creature for hundreds of years, from what I gather. But the one that made, the movie was made after, and that Strickler, wrote the book about. That is a fascinating case because the bridge fell down and 46 people died, a year later, and a lot of people thought that was some type of sign. Some people said they saw the Mothman on the bridge that day. They thought it was. Did you look into that case as well and try to find parallels?
Only the thing is, you want to draw parallels when you have something to draw parallels to. When you have bunk, nothing to draw it to, then you're just creating an illusion.
Yeah.
So you have to really watch that. I know the case. That was one of the first Keel's book. Boy, back in whenever it was 67, I think you wrote the book, or 68. I got that book right away. I had, as far as correlations, of course there's a lot of correlations, which is a great opportunity to find correlations. It's already scripted. Now for people who knew nothing about this, that would be interesting. And then they had a sighting, that would be interesting. Where we're missing the boat here is that now we have a new understanding of how to go, a new way to understand how to go about investing all types of paranormal cases or UFO cases. We have to look at the source itself. And that is really so intriguing and so important. The other thing that's going on is the social psychology here. This is a case to really examine how things are moving about. Now, December 15th is the 50-year anniversary of the bridge caving down on 40-some people. There's been evidence that says that no, that this thing or these sightings had nothing to do with it. And if anything, it may have been trying to warn people about it because there already had been corrosion on this bridge. And I think it was built in 1928 or something like that. So it was an old bridge. It was loaded with cars. And here they are right before Christmas holiday. It caves in on into the river. And 2 people to this date have never been found.
Right.
It's horrible.
Yeah. Well, all interesting. So one more time, if anyone wants to call in about this. Otherwise, I'd like to ask you about what other cryptids you have researched in the Chicago area.
Actually, not in Chicago area, but in Chicago area, of course, there's Bigfoot sightings that we get. It's even in Chicago. Close, yes, we've had Bigfoot sightings as far south as or as close to like Palos. On 159th, there was a sighting of a cryptid that looked like a Bigfoot. Now, even with this lady who had seen this big thing at this Indian boundary area, that may have been something along the line of a Bigfoot, if we want to talk cryptids. This thing didn't fly. She didn't see it fly. She just seen it make noise, assuming that it wasn't the storage place. And the gentleman did say he heard noises out in the back along the river. And you do find these teepee-type structures that are in the forest with trees, and they're always associated with Bigfoot. And we've had sightings, and Illinois has a lot of sightings of Bigfoot. We also have a lot of sightings of big birds. So it wasn't odd that with these reports came in, and there may still be some cryptid thing floating around out there. Back in 67, in fact, July was an anniversary. Lauren Coleman worked on a case down in Illinois, where a boy was lifted up by some large bird.
Wow.
And ripped his coat, and multiple witnesses. And the guy's still alive, and he's in his 50s, and been trying to contact him, by the way. And I would like to get an interview again. We've also had stories of cryptids that go all the way back. The Piasa bird the Native Americans, this large bird that would eat people after it had the taste of human flesh. So the thing is, there are stories entrenched in both the myths and the culture, and they're very interesting. But the cryptid case that I worked on, or one of the cases that the cryptid scenario was tangled in, was up in Fredericks, Wisconsin, where we had a bunch of UFO sightings. The cryptid there was like a translucent salamander type looking thing. The gentleman described it as being a, it looked like a placosomus, like an algae eating fish, but it was translucent, and it had the sheen on it looked like the sheen of oil, like this iridescence, and it would move through the trees, and it would scare the deer. And he was out there one day, and he could see this thing slithering through the trees, and he actually has footage of it. And it has gills, and from the gills is like a fluid oozing from it. Very unusual.
Wow.
Now, besides that, there was another thing up there, and I've heard about this just recently from another researcher, that he encountered this. A pixelation, something pixelated moving through the trees, looking like a predator. And this gentleman had not only seen it, but recorded it, and I've reviewed that. And he has that footage. Another investigator I had go up there actually seen it. And he says when he was looking at it, he could have sworn that this thing knew it stopped dead in its track, the pixelated form moving along, and it stopped, and it started coming towards him. Then he ran back in the house.
Now,
So
did you actually review the footage itself?
Yes, I did.
And what
I've
did you
seen
think of it?
It's something unusual. It's definitely pixelated, and it's moving. So, and this isn't the first time I heard about this. I've heard about it a few times. And in fact, you know about Skinwalker Ranch, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, that same phenomena takes place over there. In fact, what I found interesting, George Knapp, when he was talking about, we were speaking at some event, both of us, and I was listening to him. I says, pretty much everything you're talking about, we've had going on up in Fredericks, and most of it's on film. It's on video. The problem is I'm getting access to it. That's the issue. I've reviewed it. It's there. Multiple people reviewed it. And so you had the UFO activity. You had unusual cryptids. You had, it was like, a playground for the paranormal and preternatural and ufological all in one shot. And part of my research was why there? Why a place like, say, for instance, the Skinwalker Ranch? I was working on another case down in Arizona. Why that location? Is there some sort of unusual geology that makes it conducive for the phenomena to be perceived, and recorded? I don't know. But there are these locations that have higher incidence. One of these locations in the last year? I don't think so. But if it was, I sure would like to see more evidence on it, because that'd be great,
Yeah. No, I think that's all really fascinating, and a number of people will theorize that there's something going on with either a portal or some other type of dimension. I'm sure you've heard of that when it comes to all these things happening at once in one area. There's all types of speculation.
The whole dimensional concept is, I don't, that's where I really got into the dimension, potential of something dimensional was in 2004, but 2004 was the year of the weird. We had Tinley, but stop and think of the events of 2004, of all the things that went on. First of all, the year prior, the sun was on an extended cycle, 11-year cycle with sunspots and CMEs. Now it went well beyond that. And then all of a sudden, while this was going on, we had these storms down in the Caribbean. We had 13 storms That was a record period of time of weird stuff going on. Plus earthquakes. And we had the Sumatran earthquake and tsunami that took place in December. So we had a bunch of things escalating and going on. Now, in this year, we've had quite a bit of unusual activity, not so much solar, but unusual activity, earthquakes, etc. In fact, we just went through a period just the last week or so. So are we at this a cusp of something unusual taking place again? So I don't discount, like going back to the Chicago stuff, I don't discount everything. But in the same token, what they keep bringing up is this harbinger of doom. And I don't like to hear that, because knowing the psychology of some weirdos out there, all it needs is it takes one little push to get them to do something stupid, and versus something that was really just basically there to warn people, which I would like to think, in the event this wasn't a genuine event in Mount Pleasant, I think that would have been the scenario versus creating the problem.
Yeah. I'm sure you've heard of, I'm trying to remember his name now. He has been on this show. Michael Cleland, or Cleland is his last name.
Michael Cleland?
Cleland.
Cleland.
He does lectures, and he's written, I think, at least one book on owls and the connection of owls.
Yes.
Which I think is really fascinating. Now, a lot of people, are they speculating that what they're seeing is owls too, the large owls?
Well, it initially started out. Now, think of the cases here. They started out with being large owls, which could be like lechuzas or something like that. Then all of a sudden, and then all of a sudden, we're getting bat-type creatures. Now, other researchers are saying we have multiple creatures going on, because now what's being seen in the Little Village area, or at least till October the 27th, were these gargoyle-type creatures. And on the 27th, at a park, in a parking lot at a park on 31st Street, a couple was attacked by such creature, which was about 6 feet tall, jumped on the car and was hitting the windshield with its wings and trying to scrape at them. Now, the funny thing about this is it's directly across the street from one of the most popular pizza places in Chicago, Home Run Inn. They have 2 parking lots, east and west, and they're open till 11 o'clock at night. 31st Street isn't exactly no man's land. People are out. This was like a very popular time for festivities. The Day of the Dead was coming up that weekend. So, I mean, a lot of things were going on later into the evening. And for nobody else to have seen this, I find this very odd. But this is the type of events that we're getting. And it seems like a lot of these sightings have been centrally located. And again, more like gargoyles and bat-like creatures, into pockets that would be perfect to say, well, they're not going to talk because these are ethnic communities. Well, we have people in those ethnic communities, and they're saying they haven't heard anything about this, and they would have been in a situation to know. But let's assume that it was this blink moment where something came shooting in from some other quantum reality, okay, and it just shot through via, I don't know, a telephone booth or via the other thing was what, a hot tub, right? to go through a time machine. But let's say they did that. Wouldn't there be some residue somewhere? Supposedly it's hitting the car and all this stuff. There's going to be some physical trace evidence. And none of that has come forward yet. And wouldn't you want to get your hands on it? And supposedly one researcher is talking to him. I don't know where this is going or if it's developed or what. But this is the frustration that we have to deal with when you really do want to, you really would like to get something. I really would love to have something on film or whatever to say, yes, there's something going on here. And that's frustrating as all hell. You know.
What about mainstream media? Has there been any publicity as far as the sightings go? Has anyone?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
The
I know
Tribune,
the tabloids have written about it.
yes, Tribune wrote an article. And in fact, what I found interesting is they drew a correlation between the Tinley Park sighting.
Really?
They put that, and I don't know why, because the funny thing is, at Tinley Park sighting, we had hundreds of witnesses that came forward. Hundreds. We've had identified over 25 sets of footage. We've analyzed it through multiple groups of people analyzing this. Why would you want to draw that? Again, back to, is there something else at play? Is there somebody else trying to do something, to create a scenario and then say, well, it's like this, so therefore that isn't real? There's a lot of psychology here, social psychology. This is not something, and this is why I don't take this like, oh, this is just nonsense. No, there's something going on here, and to pay attention to it from the social psychology and how information gets out today in a cyber world. It's so quick. You could destroy a person's reputation in a blink in one little social media thing.
Yeah.
Well, in the same token, with you could create a flap, and then you could have it dismissed as being something crazy, and you put it all into the same bag, and that isn't the case whatsoever. I'm not saying all of this is crazy. I'm saying there's obviously people saying something, but what is it? Some of this we can dismiss as being something just misidentified, but they know that there's something else at play that is much deeper. That is the monster under the bed. There is something going on beyond that, and this is where it gets interesting.
Right.
And that's where the study's going.
Yeah, yeah. So as far as you mentioned earlier that the sightings, they came from an IP address. A couple, two different sightings came from one IP address, and then they were close. Did you actually follow through to see where those IP addresses originated? Like, were they right in the city?
That will be done.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, again, you could always fake an IP address, too.
Yeah, you can.
You can spoof it.
Yeah. Or you
or you could steal it or network it. This much we did do. The first two came in during the morning at a certain time, and the last three came in at a certain time in the evening. There is a correlation there. So even if it's now, this is the problem right off the bat with the first three. I didn't want to even know the IP addresses or which ones were the phony ones. I had to come up with a separate layer of evaluating these to see where else we could find an issue. And this isn't so much just for here. We get reports, as you know, every day. So what we learn here, we need to apply for everything else, not just in ufology, but in all research. So we don't have to waste time. It's the most precious of all commodities. So we want to dedicate it in the right direction. So, we could sort out things and evaluate stuff faster, triage our work. And when people dedicate their time to an organization or to a study, you want to have them be able to look at stuff that's worthwhile. So yeah. I think this has not been a foolish waste of time, and it is ongoing.
Wow. And yeah, who knows what the future holds for these sightings. It will be interesting. You're right as far as these other original sightings were back in the 60s. And, long before internet, long before things could get tainted easily or copycatted easily. So, you have to deal with that. Unfortunately, it's just like UFO sightings. The hoaxes can get mixed in. Now we have, Chinese lanterns and drones and everything else. Besides, a 10-year-old can get on some computer program and do a great CGI UFO.
Oh boy,
yeah.
Seen some beauties.
Yeah,
and now with the drones, oh boy, tons of drones related videos and photographs are coming in. The other thing is just the good old-fashioned refractions of light. We're getting more of those. Mm-hmm. People are just putting all sorts of stuff, but they're putting in the creative narrative to pull you in. Words are very powerful. They pull you right in. And people are so used to so much fiction, they can't discern the difference. In fact, I was reading a study. Trying to think of the university. But it came down to 29% of even average people without any fictional event that took place and an actual event that took place. They have problems. So with 29% of just normal people, just think of how many people are goofed up today, overstressed, don't get sleep or whatever, for whatever reasons, not functioning with all their faculties. And you throw that equation in, boy, that number's got to be a lot higher.
Yeah, absolutely. It's when people are, like you said, when they're tired, something can happen, and your memory isn't always reliable either. And it's best if someone reports something immediately after. I'm sure you see the difference between someone's recounting something and someone making a report.
Yeah, there's in fact, the other thing is all these are after the fact. It's not, and that's the problem. We don't have proactive work. We have reactive work. The Hesdallen lights, that is proactive work. They're actually out there with equipment, analyzing a phenomena. Many of these ghost hunters go out and they do EVPs. Whatever it is, they're doing something proactive in real time. When you're doing reactive work, you're completely dependent upon the person, their ability to recall the information, to first of all observe it in the first place and put it together and to recall it properly to you so you can discern what they're saying. And so you have three levels of interpretation going on. That makes it far too complicated. And then when it comes to equipment, of course, not everybody's an expert with a camera or a video. So you have that issue too. So we have now with the internet, and so many of the cases we get are just narratives. And this is the case here. We had just narratives, except for the two photos, which I think we pretty much nailed the first one with a very high degree of. Did you see the email I did get back from the company stating that is their their product?
I was just going through that. I saw that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that is funny.
So these things, it's difficult.
Right. And then you think of the video and film, like you just said, pictures. But one that had an ongoing narrative, one of the things that I was thinking of while we were talking about this is when Charles Halt recorded that audio when he was having that sighting in Rendlesham Forest. That is such a great tape.
That's real time. That's real time, multiple witnesses. And unfortunately, it has become one heck of a football for many issues and a torrent of emotional problems. But in scenario, and I don't think it's uncommon when you're dealing with a phenomenon like this that people interpret. You could have a person standing right next to you, and they will interpret it differently. How can that possibly be? I think the phenomena itself affects each person a little bit differently. When I say the UFO phenomena, paranormal phenomena, that's why I don't discount everything. I just know that it affects people as far as their interpretive skills. It may affect them physically in as far as the brain. Who knows? We don't know what goes on. I know in the original Mothman sightings, there were physical events where people did have physical trace scenarios. There were things going on that cannot be duplicated or cannot be explained away haphazardly, like some sort of prosaic explanation. It just doesn't happen. And that makes all the difference in the world when you can test something and you can see that something is going on. That's the second best thing to a real-time evaluation, is something that you can at least test. Photographs, physical trace evidence, something that's supportive.
Right. I have a friend listening that texts me on my phone. He's listening live now. And he said, the Mothman sightings down at Pleasant Point, West Virginia, all happened relatively in this very same area. Is that right?
Yes, that was pretty much the same area. Yeah, it was very close. All within, pretty well confined. Though in the wider area, I mean, we've had cryptids like that reported throughout the world, winged cryptids. So I mean, that's why I don't discount all this stuff. Weird happens. We know there's weird out there. Is an instance? Is it ongoing? Again, back to, was there something in that area going on? Back to the geology, or they were talking about the military, the military presence out there, the TNT. There was a lot of focus in that. What doesn't get talked about is the volume of UFO cases that were going on at that period of time in that area, just in that area. Not even to take into consideration across the country. From 66 to 67, we had tons of UFO activity. Of course, we had the swamp gas scenario in 66. So, I mean, we had tons of UFO activity going on. Very good mass sightings. But here in this one concentrated area, hundreds of reports. Very, very well documented, very good photographic evidence, on and on and on. And that takes a second seat to the Mothman scenario. Do you see? See what's going on there. Now, again, the UFOs and the Mothman, there is that correlation. Here in Illinois, during this scenario in Chicago, there was only one episode of a entrance of something being seen that may be considered as a UFO. And that was the woman on the boat off Montrose Harbor, where she saw the green light moving across the horizon. That was the only one. And that green light was more than likely, this is a genuinely honest report, which I don't think, because it comes in with the three of them collectively from the same IP address. I'm just reiterating that. But it would very well have been the starboard side of a navigational light on a boat going across further out on Lake Michigan, going from north to south. And as you know, when you're out there on the lake, you want to see lights. So you're going to keep your lights dim as possible and make sure everybody can see your navigational lights.
Yeah. Because
that is what really matters. And if you're coming into port, you want to make sure you could see what's out there, and they can make sure they could see you coming in. And I was trying to explain that to a person. I'm thinking now what I had explained to somebody. They probably never done much boating, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But that was the only thing that came in resembling a correlation. Again, here going back to the Chicago and with the original case. So there was absolutely no UFO activity whatsoever. Zero.
Wow. Well, yeah, those people said that the green orb, according to them, scared them more than the Mothman.
Yep.
I remember.
Because it moved across the horizon. It was very bright. Now, again, that has the same IP address as the three.
Yeah.
They're out there going through it all. Maybe go through everything, and the moon didn't come up for an hour and 43 minutes. And no, she sees the. I mean, at some point you just say, "Give me a break."
Yeah.
And then people are bashing you. Oh, but then it could be this, then it could be that, and then it could be the obvious.
Yeah.
But who knows?
Yeah, and it's a time waster for you, someone that's taken this seriously. It's too bad.
Of course. I mean, I'm looking for this cryptid, and I'm dead serious. I'd love, because I know these things weird exists, so I sure would like to find it and find supporting evidence. I'm not out to, if it's bunk, it's going to be debunked. Simple as that. It's nothing wrong. That's what investigative research is about. But I'm not going to pump people up and say, no, this was great, because it really wasn't. But there were some other ones that need more investigating, because they may be more promising. Sadly enough.
Right. The one thing that these cryptids, along with UFOs, all have in common is they're elusive. That's the number one thing when it comes to trying to understand what people are seeing, is they're elusive. It's not something repeatable. You can't grab it, catch it, find evidence of it, bones, a place where it lives, any of that, den, whatever it would be.
No, I think the human narrative is important of a witness, but if you don't have a person to stand witness, to even question, to even at least give their identity and shake your hand or look you in the eye and tell their story, how far can you go with it? And this is the problem with the cyber reality, the cyber potential of cyber hoaxing and cyber flaps, and interfering with genuinely good quality reports from seriously honest people that don't want to screw around but tell you their honest truth, what they saw as they saw it. And because it's inexplicable doesn't mean it didn't happen. And we have to give some degree of credence to something at least being honest when they want to bring that forward, I think.
Right. You going back to Mothman, how would someone separate that from, you hear about people talking about, or I think I heard you talk about it, pterodactyl-like creatures. People have talked about Thunderbird, sightings. A lot of, and you mentioned earlier when that bird picked someone up, supposedly, with witnesses. Don't you find this is all like, I know something is happening, but don't you just think it's kind of weird that we can't find anything?
Yes. Yeah, I think it's weird. I think it's very weird. There has to be some sort of evidence. Something, especially physical evidence. In that case, there was. There was physical evidence, and there were multiple witnesses. Then the other thing, there was a sighting not far from there soon thereafter. So there was multiple sightings of the very same large birds, the very same cryptids. So the thing is, that reinforces it, and they did come forward. It was even in the newspaper. The witnesses came forward, were able to talk to them. The problem here is they're coming forward, but not be able to, or not coming forward, or just not even anonymous. They're mysteries. They're ghosts. That isn't a witness. So they did come forward. You have some evidence, but do we have anything beyond that? No.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I sure would like that,
Yeah, we all would. Bobby wants to know, did you have a connection with, was there a connection with any police involved in any of these Mothman sightings?
Yes. There was supposedly the Ashburn Gresham district, there was supposedly 2 police officers that were out there, and they seen something that appeared to be somebody jumping off a building, and it didn't jump off, it flew away. And they filed a report. The report was not accessible by multiple people. My person that went there was from the district originally, spent many years there, and there is nothing there. They couldn't find any report. So if there's a report, we don't know where it is, and nobody at the station had a clue what they were even talking about. So what do you do?
So you think that was a false story?
Well, in talking to police officers that actually read the report, it didn't read right as something as even being submitted by a police officer. So that it is questionable. Now, that's a shame, because then somebody is pretending to be a police officer. But it seems like a lot of these reports are coming in, and it's like, okay, today, creative writing class. You're going to be a housewife, be a soccer mom with 3 kids. Or you're going to be a this or a that. You're going to be a police officer. Or you're going to be, change hats or whatever. I don't know. I would say this is the problem that we're dealing with, and it's hard to tell what the heck is going on.
Yeah.
It's frustrating as all hell.
Yeah. Someone posted that there was someone reported a flying man down in Ocala, Florida.
Yes,
you follow,
that one came. Came in, I think, last week.
So do you follow, because you were looking into this, are you following what other similar sightings are around the country?
I look at them, but I'd also like to see if they have any photographs. Do they have any evidence? How many supportive witnesses came forward? Information like that. Is it just another creative narrative in another state or another county, another city? I don't know. Because we get that going on too. Once there's a flap, once there's a sighting, a mass sighting, or something along the line of a flap, it just builds on itself. It just takes on a life of its own. So that's another problem you have to sort out. I haven't heard of any other new sighting since October 27th. I haven't heard anything except for the one down in Florida. Yeah. Now, it could be that time of the year that, Mothman does go south. I don't know.
Packed his bags, snowbirding it. Yeah.
Snowbirding it. What do you think? I'm crazy? Yeah. I'm out of here. They're already salting the streets tonight, so what the heck? We're gone.
Yeah. Well, I think we can move on to other subjects.
Okay.
And I want to thank you so much for looking into this. I think it's fascinating, and I'm sure you and I, as we always do, will stay in touch, and we'll hear what progresses if more happens.
Sure.
Yeah. So I want to ask you: have you been working on? Have you put everything else aside, or have you looked into any other UFO cases going on?
Well, we're going to be reopening, doing more work on the Tinley Park case because we did find that footage from 2000. The person who shot there was Nancy Carpenter. She shot some footage down in southern Illinois. I think it was January the 4th. Was before the big sighting down with the police officers in Millstadt, Highland, Millstadt, and Dupo. At that footage, there is multiple points of light, and one seems to arc all the way around the other, and the one in the very center has this little line of light shining, pointing at it, and I personally feel it's the edge of an object, and it swoops all the way down. And we did a cross comparison to the Tinley Park scenario, did the same thing in 2004. So we may be dealing with exactly the same type of craft or something, a similar type of object or craft doing the same maneuverability. But it just shows that it's not falling, it's arcing, it's something attached in time, space, and it's moving. So that just adds a little more intrigue to the two cases and the possibility that what was down there and those police officers were following around for hours, actually, because it went into Missouri, and police officers directly underneath it, and they were seeing this one of the massive objects. We knew there was three: a rectangular object, a triangular object with a concave, and then one more larger isosceles type object. And in Tinley Park on the October 31st sighting, we had multiple objects. We had the orange orbs. We had a horseshoe-shaped object with a boom on the top, and then we had the large isosceles. So we had three different types on October 31st. Now, it's hard, it's like when you're dealing with cases like this with footage and people that want to talk to you, and then to go into something where you're just getting narratives, it's hard to explain to people, can you see the difference here in the quality of case study, what you're dealing with. And now with that footage, I'm possibly going to have it back in my hands again to do further analysis. And if we do this, it's going to be one heck of a nice piece. It's going to be a little nice documentary, or at least a good episode for something. So it's in the works. We're going to have that.
How many? Can you remind me how many people were actually came forward and witnessed that? I know there was
I
probably
would say
a lot
200. About 200. Yeah, over 200.
I love mass sightings.
Yes, mass sightings are the best, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you remember the Carteret sighting?
Where was that?
Carteret, New Jersey. Carteret, New Jersey was 2001. And Carteret, New Jersey is well documented, radar data, very good case. And that one's kind of like fallen by the wayside. But I'd love to work on all these collectively, because I think mass sightings are the ones that are going to dictate disclosure, at least to the people with anything resembling a brain, to realize that we do have something here. And they may say, well, isn't it about time somebody says something? Okay. That'll take us somewheres. Mass sightings, not the mysterious narratives.
Yeah, I've heard, I had a conversation with someone about a mass sighting. They said, well, there are mass illusions, mass hallucinations. So,
well, okay, here we are in 2017, and it's the 100-year anniversary. Again, we talked about this before.
But I like it. I like the topic. Yeah.
Fatima.
Right.
What a great mass sighting. And what is it, a mass sighting? Sure, I don't care what your religious beliefs or call it whatever you want, but it happened, and there was physical trace evidence. They can't deny it. And what do we think? There was some 30,000 people out there? Come on, that was a good one. Right?
That's right. And let me ask it, because since we talked about this last time, I was reading about it, and it seems to me that the religious aspect may have been added after?
Yes, it was added afterwards, and I think it's both religious and political. Understanding the state of the politics, and the church was being bashed, something severe out there, and there was a lot of turmoil.
Well, this was actually during the World War I, right? I mean, that's 1917.
Right, it was 1917. So I mean, just think of the world of the climate of the world. In fact, all these, it's interesting to see what's going on in the world from many perspectives: the social perspective, historical, everything. To look at what's going on in the environment and see if there's causality or whatever, or is it just whatever? But there's war going on, and this happens. It takes place. And there's social strife in Portugal, horrible issues, union fightings and internal strife, and then there's issues within the families, and the women were treated something horrible. So there was a feminine movement, and the church was being really getting pushed around because they were more of a fascist element and overly conservative element. And they were trying to move them out of the social environment. So I mean, there was a lot of upheaval going on, and here they have this massive sighting of something truly anomalous, and they embraced faith, and they did so willingly. I mean, just think of many of the people that came out there. They were out there just to see how foolish these people were, and here they experienced this crazy event, and people standing in certain locations experience different things, and as far as within the proximity of the object that flew over. And it was an object. Some people said they've seen something inside. Some people had healings. There was heat being felt, no doubt. They were dried after being wet. So, I mean, a bunch of weird things transpired. Now, whatever you want.
Wasn't there a claim that the sun was falling or something?
The disc, and it was a disc, and they called it. They said, "Yeah, it's the sun." It wasn't the sun; it was a disc. It was an unidentified object coming down, and they were able to look into this, and they were able to see three individuals. Some people of faith were saying, "Yes, we saw Jesus and Mary and Joseph." Now, I don't know if they had their ID cards with them; they were able to tell. But that cracks me up. I'm like, okay, you know what they look like? I don't know. Yeah. But did he have a toupee? I mean, I don't know. This is so funny. But that's what they said. Mm-hmm. And either way, the events took place, and they spun it the way they wanted to. Is it any different than what's going on today with these apparent sightings? People are spinning it any which way they want to also. I think, they sold a lot of newspapers, so there's an element there. They may have used it to just discount the Tinley Park sighting. They may, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's always something when there's interest of people. There's something gravitating the interest of people. Spin it the way you want it, and that's the pros are doing it. I could see it now, and they did it back then. They wanted to have salvation for, keep the church in Portugal. I think they did a good job. It is the number one destination point in Portugal. I think it still is. So it does get people there. And, what was the year? Do you remember the year? I can't recall the year where they actually divulged the information and had it available for people to examine, where all this came out. No. I think it was their 70s or 80s, but it actually came about because they had a freedom of information in Portugal, and the church had to abide by it. And the clergy actually in the church there, many of them didn't even know that this information was still there or even read it. They were so well, and they're already indoctrinated that they didn't even need to read it. And that's how it is. No different today. People are so indoctrinated on whatever they hear or want to believe, and it's want to believe, that they won't even pursue any research or reading. That's sad, but it's the way it is.
Has there ever been other sightings there after that period
Beforehand,
of time?
Before and afterwards. Yeah, that was part of the culture. The little woman, the little lady was seen before by people in the area. And so the funny thing is we have a woman from Portugal in our group. And she knows this whole story very well. In fact, she was the one that got me interested in reading more about it. So there is a legend and a myth about this thing being seen before. And it was well known that these little people, in fact, the area is named relative to the phenomena prior to this. So there is a history of it. So it's nothing. It wasn't nothing new in 1917, at least for the people living there.
Now, what about now? Has anything happened in recent history?
I don't think there has ever been anything that dramatic as far as a mass sighting. As far as anything on that large, I mean, we've had all sorts of other sightings, but nothing so convincing. I mean, you had physical trace evidence, you had 30 to 60,000 people, and not just one time. It was multiple sightings of at least individuals or groups of individuals, multiple witnesses, and then the mass sightings.
So tell me, did these 30 to 60,000 people, which I'm going to try to pull up a picture of that coming up here in a minute, and those people that were there, did they just come from all over the world and they just sit there and just wait and see what happens?
They were waiting, and many of them, because here you are, you're going there, and it was a rainy day. They're sitting out in the rain on the one day in particular. Many of them were just to make fun of them because they didn't think anything was going to happen. It was raining. They were covered in mud, very uncomfortable, and living in an environment, that we have social strife going on, union strikes, and you're going to be dragged into war pretty soon. They knew it. On and on and on. There was all sorts of stuff. So here they're out there standing in the rain and waiting for a miracle, and I'll be doggone if it didn't happen. Some of those folks, other folks, are just there to laugh at them, and I think they got a welcome surprise.
And what was the span of time that this happened?
You mean as far as since it started and then ongoing? It was months.
Months?
It was months. Yes, it was months, and it was pretty much on a certain day, and I forget what it was. But then it stopped, and then of course there were the little boy and girl. They said, I guess they knew they were going to die soon. They did. And then Lucia, she was put into a cloistered order and could not talk about this. How convenient. And I knew somebody that actually went and seen her because they're a relative. That was in 2003. But she died a couple of years ago. Wasn't all that far back, maybe 3 years ago, something like that. And but the thing was, she was not to talk about this, and when they were dead serious about it. And boy,
amazing. So, I'm putting a picture for people watching YouTube. I'm putting up a picture now where people are like kneeling and praying and looking up. So there was a religious tone to this during that time and not after.
Yes. Well, they felt there was some sort of religious. The children felt there was something religious tied into it. At least one of them did. The other thing is the religious element is huge when it comes to ufology and all these phenomena in general. In ufology, I just think of one account. A friend of mine who's passed on recently told me about a friend of hers who was a farmer, and UFO came down and she went out and kneeled and prayed to it. So, I mean, people do things like this because they don't know how to react, and the first thing they react to is they see something that's outside of the realm of what they could relate to. So you better pray to the darn thing because it may just eat you. Who knows? I don't know if it's fear or if it's something, but it's not uncommon, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
The religious element comes in huge. And today, that is another factor in part of what I have to deal with when you're out there talking to people about the subject matter, is that there is such a strong disdain from certain religious elements about the subject matter to even talk about it. And if you do talk about it, it has to be basically ushered into two categories, good or bad, and demonic or angelic, versus I don't know what it is, but I'd sure like to, I'm just investigating it. And that I find real interesting, too.
Mm-hmm. So what did they, as time went on, as far as you know, what did they come up with what was happening? I mean, there must have, with all these people getting involved, there must have been such a tension that, say, Puerto Rico, the Portugal government itself must have got involved in what was happening.
They did. They got involved, and they were very concerned about this because it was getting a lot of publicity, and they didn't know which way it was going to go. I think they sat down and they said, well, let's make a decision on this and try to quell it, try to keep it quiet. And that's, I think, where the cloister order and having her guarded off to a cloistered order, what they had to do. Something had to take place to control. Too many people, too many fears. This was a very real event. You can't say that 30,000 people are all crazy. Something happened, Better give it an identity that we could all have some degree of control over, or at least have some element of comfort instead of fear. And I think, in mass sightings, the first thing you don't want to do is instill fear. You don't want to do that. I know at least, and out here, Tinley Park Police Department, fantastic police department. And, the thing is, they were getting calls like you wouldn't believe. Hundreds and hundreds of calls and people were stopping in the street, going out, looking, and this happens. And so you have disorder, and you're trying to keep order, and you have the kooky stuff that does go on, that it really does need to have your attention, still go on. Meanwhile, they got this. So I don't think it's a blessing to say, that these mass sightings take place. Well, what happens to the social order? It gets pretty screwed up pretty darn quick. So you have to put a kibosh on some of the fear. and have some degree of control. And I can understand that.
Yeah. How did this end? Was there any type of an event that made this thing stop?
That made it stop?
I mean, was there any type of event tied to it stopping? I guess that's the question. Or did it just fade out?
Well, the last sighting, as I recall, I don't recall anything beyond that. The last event. The three kids were taken, and the one was put into a cloistered order. The two other died from, I believe they died from the flu. There wasn't, basically the church put it into the fold of a religious apparition, and they had built a monument there, a shrine, and basically incorporated into religious doctrine. So that's what it is. It's another religious event, and that's how it's been.
Now, do people
Portugal
go there?
Well.
Do people go there today expecting to get healed? Is it one of the places that people go?
Yes. That's the funny thing is the mind could do a lot of things, and there may be some element there that another substrate that may allow something that's innate to us to spring forth. I recall my father when he was dying with leukemia. One doctor said, "Did you see a faith healer?" And he was dead serious. So I don't discount all this other stuff that some people may call woo, because there may be something to it at a level that we can't understand. Who knows? But it is interesting.
Really, yeah. So yeah, they don't get much more. You wouldn't call anything much more of a mass sighting than you would that.
Yeah, 30 to 60,000 people.
Yeah,
that's a big one. I know that a few other sightings. Phoenix was a big sighting, but I think Tinley was pretty darn close as far as the amount of people, larger population, I think, are pretty close. The Battle of L.A., whether it's a weather balloon or whatever you'd think. I think one person you may want to have on the show is Dave Marler to talk about his research on the Battle of L.A.
I've had
very good work.
Yeah, I've had him on, and I have tried about 5 times to get him to come on about that. He just keeps. The last time he didn't write me back, but he usually writes me back, and just says he's just absolutely swamped. He's a very busy guy.
Yes,
so
and
hopefully
good
that'll
friend
happen.
of mine.
Yeah. Maybe you can influence him.
Yeah, I'll give him a call.
Well, we got about 6 minutes left. So is there anything else you are going to be working on? I mean, this Tinley Park sounds like a pretty big deal. Is there anything else you're going to be working on?
Right now, I'm trying to put together a very simplified process of doing a triage on these cases when they come in. So I'm working on that, like redoing the Hynek-Vallée analysis, but for more of a triage, and doing it in mind of what we're dealing with the cyber reality today. In other words, things are a little bit different now, and we have to readjust it. Going into coming in off the computer, and I think that's going to help quite a bit. I'm going to be working on, again, Tinley, got a few other cases. Going to be opening up a very interesting case that took place in the 70s in the area of the like Fox Lake, Bistake area up that way. It was Grass Lake case, a very good case with ongoing events, multiple sightings, multiple witnesses, physical trace evidence. And it's one of these old cases that has a lot of information that hasn't been looked at in a long time. I think it's definitely worth taking a peek at. So that, and I hope to take some adventure up north and work my way up the Ice Age Trail and look at some of the anomalies, tons of anomalies up there in Wisconsin. That's what I'll be doing in spring.
Oh, excellent. Someone wrote earlier they wanted to know if you have ever followed any like USO sightings in Lake Michigan.
Yes, I've had a few witnesses talk about USO sightings. One gentleman came to me because of the Tinley Park sighting, and he had witnessed multiple large objects coming out of Lake Michigan. Every once in a while, we get stories about them. And when you take a peek at the some of the sightings from Michigan, some of the big sightings that took place in the South Haven area, take a peek at some of those reports where the information or the radar data seems to like fall off once it went over the Lake Michigan. Now, did they go in the lake or not? So I think the maritime research and USOs in the Great Lakes really needs to be taken a peek at. There is a whole volume of information that needs to be looked at, not just currently, but also historically. So thanks for that question. That's a good one.
Yeah. Actually, isn't the northern part of Lake Michigan, am I thinking wrong that it borders Canada? Am I thinking of a different
borders? No, it borders Canada.
So just devil's advocate, if a plane came in and it flew low under the radar, it could go right in to Canada, couldn't it, on Lake Michigan?
Probably.
I mean, it was just a thought when you mentioned
well, then you're getting picked up by different radars. The closer you get to the border, you should be getting picked up because they're like, they're reversed triangles, and the closer you go in, it's going to be different. You're going to be getting lower and lower as far as the ceiling's not going to be there, but it's going to be lower.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
each one's different.
And I know we have 2 minutes left, but I know we have talked a number of times about the O'Hare case. Some people were writing in the chat room earlier about that.
Sure.
That's a fascinating case, and I'm just waiting for the day when someone retires from United Airlines and they're going to open their mouth and say what happened.
Well, I actually had somebody do that. It was a manager. He was underground working that day. He was inspecting the baggage. He was in charge of inspecting the baggage during that, and he heard all this chatter up on the Beacon course. So I talked to his friend, was a manager, and he was telling him, he was giving him a live report looking at this thing directly below the clouds.
Wow.
And so he says, it absolutely was there. It was an object. It was below the clouds. It was right above C17. It was there, no doubt. And he says, I don't care what anybody says. It happened, and it was there. So now that a lot of these people are retiring, they're becoming a little more, bold, and they're coming out and talking about it, and that's great. I think in time we'll probably get maybe even a picture. Wouldn't that be great?
That would be wonderful. Well, Sam, it's been great as always. I consider you a friend. It's always fun talking to you.
Absolutely, my friend. You take care.
All right, you too.
Bye.
All right, bye. All right, everyone. So thank you so much for listening. And again, we are staying on YouTube. Now, there's a very small amount of people that have an interest in my other real job, and that's fine art and antiques. And just to let you know, there was a painting that sold for a world record price of $450 million of Da Vinci. I'm going to be talking to the expert that authenticated that and had worked with it right from back in 2005 on. So he'll be on the show live on Saturday morning, this coming Saturday morning at 10 o'clock in the morning. So that's anyone that has any interest in fine art and antiques. That show will be on YouTube as well. And I also have a podcast, the Antique Auction Forum, where that goes. That's where that lives. So anyway, thanks so much. We'll be back next week with Robert Powell, and always a great guest to have on. And thanks so much. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky. Thank you for listening, and thank you for supporting the show.